Welcome to Wine for Normal People, the podcast for people who like wine, but not the snobbery that goes with it. I'm your host, Elizabeth Schneider, author of the Wine for Normal People book and certified wine dork. Join me as I hit record on this conversation with a friend in the wine industry. This and all shows with guests are informal but educational discussions between passionate wine friends. All guests are personal friends or friends of friends in wine, not strangers. And like any conversation between friends, we're going to talk back and forth, interrupt each other, laugh, have fun, debate tough questions, voice opinions. Most of all, enjoy sharing our time together and with you. If you're in, pour yourself a glass, pull up a chair, and join us for this great chat. This show is brought to you by Wine Access. Go to wineaccess.com/WFNP to access their site, then browse their amazing selections of curated wines that you can't find locally. They're all at great prices. They've got great perks for shopping there, including free shipping on orders over $150. Wineaccess.com/WFNP. Listen in the middle of the show for more details. We are here with Bevis Sydney, who many of you who are patrons know, and many of you who listen to the movie podcast. And I would like to give another push for Drops of God. A lot of you guys saw that I got the screener for it. Season 2, amazing. Bevis, you have to, is it released yet in the UK?
Yeah, it's being released week by week. So I'm up to episode 2. So if you're further on, please, no spoilers. But yeah, I'm loving it.
I'm not going to tell you, but It's good. It's really, really good.
Yeah. Yep.
But anyway, we are here because just by pure chance, Bevis and I wound up in Croatia at around the same time. And he sent me all of these thoughts about Croatia. And then I went and the thoughts were exactly the same. So I thought it might be time to update the Croatia podcast. And as Bevis and I were just talking about before we hit record, it's not changed very much since I did that podcast many years ago, but I wanted Bevis here. Bevis, you talk about some of your observations, and then I'll give a quick overview, and then we're going to talk about what we found or didn't find.
Sure. I'm just a little bit of context. So I was there in September of last year, just before you, as you say. I focused all of our time. It was a family holiday on the Dalmatian coast. So we did Split and Dubrovnik and a couple of islands. We'll even squeeze in a trip to Mostar in Bosnia and Herzegovina, all in just 12 days.
Wow.
There were 4 of us, only 3 wine drinkers, and a heavy bias for white wine, which, as I'm sure we will come on to, not a bad thing in Croatia, focusing on white wines. I feel like a bad wine person because I wasn't able to persuade them to go on winery visits or guided wine tastings. I just captured what we drank on Vivino so I could look at it when I got home. And I only managed a small amount of research before I went because I happened to arrive there having just visited Burgundy for the first time, which really was a wine trip. And I was kind of a wine guy. So my friends, so I needed to be really up on Burgundy. So I kind of landed there. I'd listened to your amazing episode 371, but I kind of landed there with not much. I hadn't touched a drop of Croatian wine before I got there. So it really was quite it was an immersion for 10 to 12 days. But when I came back, I'd done quite a lot more drinking and thinking. I'll cover this later, but I found a couple of suppliers that will export directly from Croatia to US and UK. So I can cover that a bit later. But I mean, amazing destination, amazing holiday, interesting wine experience, which we will come to, I'm sure.
Right. And my experience was that I went with my friend Brett, who is starting Walk and Wine in Croatia, shout out to Brett, and asked me to come and see if there was a possibility of me leading trips through Croatia for wine. I was definitely on a wine trip and definitely had the research done, but my conclusions were, yeah, I'm probably going to do a trip there, but very specifically because you can't access these wines in mass outside. So let me just give an overview, a recap of episode 371, which if you're a patron, you can go back and listen to it. But here's Croatia's deal. It is amazing. It is this country that is on the Adriatic and it's right across from Italy. And one of the things, and Bevis, you can back me up on this, on the Dalmatian coast, I did not realize how Mediterranean Italian it really felt.
Yeah, a lot of the architecture. Obviously, there's the ancient Roman influence, but also, yeah, you could be in Italy. There was gelato on every corner,
Every corner.
and just a beautiful coastal setting. Just yeah.
There's a couple of different areas, but just a quick history. They've been making wine for about 2,500 years. There's coins and amphora and things like that, which were discovered in Dalmatia. And we know that vines were planted in the Bronze Age by the Illyrians. You had Romans here, as Babiç just mentioned, and they've been making wine for thousands of years from their native grapes. They had a pause in the 16th century because of the Ottoman Empire, but before that, the Venetians were here. And that's partially why it looks so Italian. So the Venetians came and they built all of these fortresses. They built out the towns. If you look at the history, between Rome and Venice, you have a lot of that Italian influence or Mediterranean influence. As we move on, phylloxera was very, very bad for Croatia's indigenous varieties. They planted German and Austrian varieties during the Habsburg Empire. Again, I don't think we usually associate Croatia with all the other things that went on in Europe. There's a very set reason for that, which is what happened in the 20th century, where they fell behind the Iron Curtain. Istria, which is near Italy, and Dalmatia, the home of so many indigenous varieties, got hit with phylloxera. Some of them did a little bit better because there's sandy soils there, and phylloxera does not do well in sand, which is great. They did a lot of field blending. So if some of the varieties didn't make it, others did after phylloxera. But today there's between 90 and 120 indigenous varieties. They're not really cataloged very well. Most of them are in tiny family-owned parcels. If you listen to the Zinfandel episode that I just released, you will hear that story. And that's all about Croatia in many ways. And it's about this hunt for the foundation of Zinfandel, which was found in a tiny family parcel. But there's only about 40 native varieties in commercial production. Communism was the big thing here. And actually, they still talk about this a lot. It is still so much part of the country. And it's part of why these people are so happy and welcoming of tourists. They are wonderful because communism happened in the 20th century. And it just killed the wine industry completely. Huge co-ops, state-run. I mean, we see the story over and over again. We see it in Hungary. You see it in Bosnia. Bosnia apparently has some really great wine. You see it anywhere communism touched. They destroyed all of the independent wineries, and people who had small home vineyards were the ones that kept a lot of the indigenous grapes alive. They needed high-yielding varieties. Between World War I and World War II, these high-yielding grapes, they did whatever they could to grow in mass. And then from the 1970s on, international varieties. Under communism, you could not own more than 10 hectares of land, period. State-owned production, thousands of little tiny family growers and wineries that we see now, but nobody who could produce at scale. And then the Civil War happened. So Croatia was not a country. It was part of the former Yugoslavia under Tito, who was the dictator. And in 1991, and some of you who are listening, I can't believe probably we're not alive when this happened, there was a horrible, horrible, devastating civil war. People left, and from a wine perspective, vineyards were abandoned. The economy was ruined. Croatia was crushed. So many people died. It was a really, really, really bad time. And finally, the economy started to get back on its feet only in the early 2000s. Producers were only able to export after Croatia joined the EU, which was very important to them because they felt that that was protection against communism, against this happening again. At that point, when things were shiny and new in 2013, you had new technology, you had experimentation, flying winemakers coming in from the US and especially from Australia. The EU money helped a lot. But the situation today is that when I did that podcast, there were 20,000 hectares of land under vine. And today there are 22,000 hectares of land planted, or 54,000 acres under vine. And this is in the areas of Istria, Dalmatia, and continental Slavonia. Slavonia is where those oak barrels come from that are so popular in Piedmont, in Tuscany especially. But we are talking about a place that has not grown, in many years, 1,500 producers, family owned. Most of it is for personal consumption. Most of the production is for tourism. There are more imports than exports. They don't really export a ton. And the three areas that we have are Slavonia and the Croatian Danube area, which is about a third under vine. Most of us for wine are not going to be going there, but if you are in Zagreb, that's a place to go. And I have heard tell of really great, especially sparkling wines from that area. And this is the Croatian uplands. And then you have Istria and Dalmatia, which are most of the plantings. There are PDOs, the protected designations of origin, 66 appellations. Most of the stuff is labeled bivarietal, good for us. And then just to get into it real quick before Bevis and I start talking about the actual wines, the continental areas are between Slovenia and Hungary in the north, Bosnia in the south, and they have a continental climate. They are hilly, and around Zagreb, if you happen to be there, a lot of international grapes, plus the Hungarian Furmint, which is called Moslavak here. They've got some botrytized wines. They have some other native varieties here. Again, you're not going to see them in the market, but sparkling wine, probably the big star of the Croatian uplands. Slavonia is also an internal area. This is where the forests for growing the Slavonian oak for the barrels is, moderate continental climate. And this is where Graševina, which is Croatia's most planted white variety, has its star. Graševina is actually Welsh Riesling, and we'll talk about those grapes in a second. Frankova, which is Blaufränkisch, is up there because it's not too far from Austria. And then you have the thing that we're going to really be talking about, Dalmatia and the Croatian islands. We will discuss our experiences there, but it's Mediterranean. It's beautiful. It is known as a tourist destination. Dubrovnik is here where the King's Landing from Game of Thrones was. Lots of islands. Bevis will take us through some of them. The Pelješac Peninsula, which has a lot of interesting wines. And then finally, there's Istria. Istria is the northernmost wine region. It is probably the most outward looking. It probably has the most esteemed wines, maybe the most promise, although Dalmatia could do more. This is the Northwestern Peninsula, belonged to Austria, to Italy, finally got annexed by Yugoslavia. Lots of different influences in cuisine, in language, in wine. Very Mediterranean, like Dalmatia, like northern Italy. They have truffle production there that apparently rivals Alba in Piedmont. There's cool air from the Alps, so you have interesting microclimates and rocky soils. You have iron-rich soils, sandy soils. Most of it is Malvasia istriana, as they say it in Italy. It's called Malvasia istarka. They do some orange wine, skin contact wines. There's a Zlactina, which is a very specialized wine, another great white. And then Teran is their red, which is acidic and really very pretty. I had one example of that when I was there. Rifosk is another one. Istria is one to watch, but Dalmatia is where most of us are going to go. The one thing that I will say before I turn it over to Bevis to really start talking about the wines and the grapes is that there's a lot of biodiversity here. There's some very interesting terroir, especially in Dalmatia. There's all this ancient winemaking. That's kind of the overview. Would you say that that's a good thumbnail sketch?
Absolutely. I got just a couple of things from my own experience having been there. So obviously I was a young adult in the 90s, so I was aware of the war, but I listened to a couple of history podcasts on the way out, just to kind of, I'll just need to catch up on the history.
So horrible.
It was so brutal. I was going to share them with my family and I didn't. I gave them a summary, but it's, yeah. And to think that was about 30 years ago. So they are emerging from a pretty bleak, immediate past.
If you get them talking about it, I remember I was talking to my taxi driver about it. It scarred it really has informed this younger generation. They were kids. He was telling me some horrible stories. Like they were starving. There was no food. It was just awful.
Medieval sieges of cities.
Yes.
So Dubrovnik, which is actually pretty well set up to withstand a siege if you've seen Game of Thrones. I know it was just terrific. A couple of observations. That thing about small producers, personal consumption. I was there during harvest time, and I just happened one day on one of the islands to be walking down this really steep side street, and there were two guys there with a minivan unloading crates into a single unit garage, crushing them into tanks. I wanted to talk to them, but you know what it's like at harvest time. No one's going to give you the time of day. They are against the clock. And so that really is still happening. I hadn't appreciated that stat about how little, despite all of this investment, despite potential international interest in their production, it's just not happening. And the other thing I'd say is, in Dubrovnik, I went into one of the wine shops, a very expensive wine shop. Everything in the city centre in Dubrovnik is very expensive.
Yep. Split too. Split is also really expensive.
I got chatting to the guy there, and he said that he has to order the wines he wants 1 to 2 years in advance in order to secure them. And I said, well, surely then all the producers are planting more and investing. And he said, no, that's how they like it. Weirdly, for a country that in so many other realms and levels seems so ambitious and young, scrappy and hungry and all of that kind of thing, on this, they're just like, nope.
I don't understand this.
Yeah.
So I had the same exact experience, and I just told you what the numbers were. In the last 5 years, nothing has really changed or grown. And it's the same story. I was there first week in October. They were out of wines all the time. Like, it was like, okay, well, I'll have the Grk. We don't have that. Okay, well, then I'll have the Poşip. Oh, we don't have that one either. Okay, what do you have? Crazy. And I also heard that same story from some of the sommeliers, and they said a lot of the things that they have to push are not Croatian wines because there's not enough supply. So in the restaurants, they're giving us Croatian wines to the extent they can, but they're importing things because otherwise there's no wine to be consumed. And Croatia is not a massive wine consumer, but they're drinking all of their own wines. And that is why, if you're listening to this and you're thinking like, oh, I've never seen Croatian wine on the shelf, it's not because it's not good. It's because there isn't a whole lot of it. And for some reason, these producers are just not growing or doing at scale. You don't see any plantings. There's nothing. It's sort of like, this is our thing.
We didn't do a lot of driving, but when we did in the wine areas, it all looked really established until we went to Bosnia and Herzegovina. And there, a lot of young planting, some really nice looking wineries emerging. So I think maybe one to watch in the future.
The buzz on Bosnia Herzegovina, I never say it right. Herzegovina, right? That's how you say it.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. You're saying it right. Herzegovina. Our Croatian guide, he's not a wine guy, said that a lot of the Croatians will go over there to get wine because it's really good. And they have different grapes. It's so close. It's right there. They used to be the same country, but some of the grapes are different. And they're doing different things with them. So what would be funny is that Croatia is the real draw. It's so gorgeous. Of course, you would want to go there. But it may be that the ambition of the young winemakers in Bosnia may outstrip Croatia, and they may actually, in the end, be more popular, which would be really interesting because they actually care. They're actually doing stuff.
Yeah. And if they can get theirs on the wine list in Croatia, they'll be relatively cheap. It's a much poorer country.
Yep. So let's talk about the wines. Let's talk about the reds first. I'm surprising you.
Okay.
Because I'd like to get that out of the way before we start talking about the whites.
Blend on a high, yeah.
I had a lot of reds, and they were a bit more available than some of the interesting whites, sadly, because a lot of the whites that I wanted to try were not available. They were sold out. The reds were more available. These wines are very rustic, as the wine industry likes to call them. They are alcoholic. They are extremely extracted in the winemaking process. They're clearly pressing to get the most out of them. I almost wish there was more oak to take out some of the grape tannin, which is so harsh. And these wines are inky black for the most part. The Patron is not, Babiç is not, but Plavac Mali, Sirljenik Kastelenski, which is the Zinfandel grape, and I can't remember some of the other ones, but they were, for me, in some cases, not drinkable because they were so heavy. They reminded me of emerging regions in California in the late 90s, early 2000s, before they got help. I mean, I'm thinking like Amador County, which the wines are really not like that so much anymore. Paso Robles used to be like this. They've got a similar climate. It's hot. They don't seem to be managing the winemaking process in the way that would be universally appealing. I don't know. What was your impression? I thought Babiç was the best grape that I had. It is Pinot Noir like in its constitution. it wasn't perfect, but it certainly was nice. And Tehran also, I only was able to find one of those. That's from Istria. That had nice acidity, some good tannin, aromatic. Babiç is a really nice grape. Again, not a whole lot of it. It comes from Korčula, which is an island, and is a really nice, more acidic grape. How about you? What do you think?
Well, so I think it's quite telling that you said the availability of the reds outstrip the whites noticeably. Potentially time of year, warmer times on the coast, people want to drink white wines, but there may have been market forces even amongst the sort of transient tourist population kicking in quite quickly. My wife and daughter are particularly much more of a white wine fan, so we just always gravitated towards white wines. It was hot as well. So whilst we were there, I only tried the Plavat Mali. I think we had 3, 2 of them from outside Dingaç. Dingaç is kind of, they really put big up Dingaç. It's sort of it's their kind of
PDO.
The one that seems to have the most marketing push behind it and the most prestige. The 2 that we tried, one of them was in a tourist restaurant in a fabulous part of Dubrovnik outside a church, beautiful, but clearly not a restaurant that was going to manage their wine well. It was a little cold. My wife couldn't drink it. The sort of oakiness, interesting, you were saying more oak might have helped. I may be confusing the oak and the tannin interplay, but it was actually more, it was almost piney.
Yeah, I can see that.
Almost like a Retsina, that sort of flavor. So I have one by the glass Dingaç, and that was nicer. It was smoother, a lot of vanilla, black cherry, still perhaps a little bit too much oak, but that was good. That was fine. So the other reds that I've had, even though we did go to Korčula, I didn't try a Babiç because I'll come on to the Grk, the white wine from Korčula, which was fantastic.
Right. Yep, we'll talk
about
that.
When I got back, I did order a couple of Tehrans because I hadn't had that, and a Babiç. Babiç I'm drinking now and is very nice. It's the first really likable red wine that I've had.
That's what I've observed as well.
Yeah, it's a 2019, so it might be a little past its prime, but it's fine and yeah, nice.
A little bit lighter, on the lighter side, especially for Croatia.
Yeah, quite complex. There is peppery herbal notes, a little bit of cola, vanilla, cherries, berry, and some dried fruit in there as well because of the age on it. So that's a tick. That's a win. The Tehran, I've really struggled to find a consistent kind of description for it.
I think that's the problem. They have not found a style for it. Yeah.
And yeah, that's fair enough. Different people do different things with the same grape and it can come across very differently. But I've seen everything from lighter, and the 2 I had were not like, they were lower alcohol than the Plavat Mali for sure. But the tannin and just the robustness of them were almost similar. Yeah, I didn't enjoy them that much. But that's 2 examples.
Yeah, I had a few while I was in Croatia. I've never been able to find them here. And they were the lighter style. When we had free time, I was looking specifically for somewhere I could go that had someone who was knowledgeable. And I kept saying to them, give me something that you wouldn't give anybody else except if they were from Croatia. So they did give me things like Tehran, but they weren't giving me Plavat Mali. And I was drinking a ton of Plavat Mali because every winery that we went to had Plavat Mali. The other thing I want to say is, because I did go on these winery visits, these are not some mom and pop shop, the ones that I went to. They were very nice. They were extremely nice, very modern.
Yep.
They did the full tasting experience. But the problem was for me that some of the places that we went, the wines were not really the style that I like, especially in the reds. The reds had a lot of Tribodrag or Soljenik Kastelinski. It doesn't have, at least the way they're making it, it doesn't have the nuance that Zinfandel can have. And I think a lot of this has to do with how long they're letting it hang on the vine and then the winemaking techniques. But as they pointed out to me there, the industry is 30 years old. California has been making wine for 150 years, and Zinfandel in particular. So they've got some time on it. Italy obviously has been making wine longer. And even though Primitivo is a little bit heavier, I think, than some of the better examples of Zinfandel in the US, right? There's many different styles of Zinfandel. Maybe someday they will get there with the Tribodrag, but I don't know. I think that was the question that I kept coming to with the reds. Who are they making this wine for? Because it's definitely not the international market. That's clear, except Babiç and maybe the Dingaç. These wines don't fit in with the profile. And a lot of it has to do with winemaker choice. And although they don't have a ton of experience, still, there's some young winemakers who do great things without a lot of experience. I'm not even sure the wines go very well with the food, which is interesting because Szoljenik Kasztelanski and Plavac Mali are from Dalmatia. These are big grapes, and the food in Dalmatia is not heavy. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know whether they were building towards a Parker type style back in the day and they're still veering away from that. Because the weird thing is, I was putting all of mine on Vivino because it's just an easy way, quite subtly in a restaurant without being boring with my family, to just record. I've clicked it, it's there. The white wine's all getting good scores, but the red wines too, like 4+ scores for Vivino. I know it's not an academic source and it is just people's scores. It may be that holiday halo effect that I think you referred to in the past.
Yep.
People want to like the wines they're having because they're on holiday. And the other thing so about the Terran, the website that I have found that is a marketing site for Croatian wines, trying to sell you Croatian wines, their generic description of Terran says lots of positive things, but it also says robust and sometimes difficult. And that was...
the tannin is hard to manage in that grape, yes.
Yeah.
But like I said, I had a few examples where it was tannic, but not heavy.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that you're saying. You're saying that it's very rustic. So I think there are some people that are mastering it. Again, the benefit for Terran is that it is in Istria, where you have Italy right there. You can get help. That cannot be underestimated, that Istria has a big advantage in terms of winemaking because they are close to Italians. And so you can get consulting winemakers. You can go across the border and see what they're doing. And they do that. So it is definitely an advantage. I hope that you like this show. I can tell you that Bevis and I had a fantastic time reminiscing about our trips and looking at the parallels. I'm going to take a step away from the podcast. We need to thank our sponsors as we do every week. First, Wine Access, wineaccess.com/WFNP is how you'll get onto Wine Access's site. There is so much there to explore. They taste tens of thousands of wines every year. Only the best get on the site. These wines are things that you may not be able to find locally. It gives you an opportunity to check out new wines that maybe you didn't know about or you hadn't thought about buying, and buy them from the best source that you possibly can. Shipping is free on orders of over $150, and they have a buy and hold feature where if you buy a wine and then you don't see anything else you like right then, their selection is ever changing. You can go back in a few days or in a week and get to that $150 threshold by purchasing more wines, and then you get free shipping. Shipping costs a lot of money. This is a real great perk of Wine Access. You can also join my wine club with Wine Access, wineaccess.com/normal. You'll get a quarterly shipment for $150, and because you meet the $150 free shipping threshold, you get shipping included in that package. So make sure you go to wineaccess.com/WFNP or wineaccess.com/normal for the wine club. And you can go to patreon.com/winefornormalpeople and join my community. This community is how the podcast stays alive. There's over 1,000, almost 2,000 posts on Patreon. I've been on it since 2018. There's things on Patreon you will never get to see anywhere else from me. Writings on various subjects, and of course the back catalog of the podcast, which you can only get with a Patreon membership. Membership starts at $3 a month or $33 for the whole year. Patreon.com/winefornormalpeople. And thank you so much to all the patrons and to you for considering joining. Also, don't forget winefornormalpeople.com/classes. February is basically French month. I've got Wines of France coming up, and then the Greats of Bordeaux based on the series that I did last year. Check it out today, winefornormalpeople.com/classes. And now let's get back to the show. I guess that our overall impression, both of our impressions, and I had more red than you did, it sounds like. And for me, Babiç is the winner. The other grapes will have to just wait and see what happens, because I was so hopeful that this time was going to be the red that I was going to like. And I just did not find anything that I was excited about. But I want to say that the whites were the opposite.
We'll come to the whites. So I'm holding out. I've got 2 more left from the order I made. One I'm hopeful for because it is a Dingach. So,
Okay.
The other one is I'm going to try and pronounce it, Szyniak Kastelanski.
Jelenic Kastelanski. Yes. Yeah. Or you could call it Tribodrag. That's the actual
Well, interestingly,
name
on the back label, not on the front, but on the back label, it calls itself Szyniak Zinfandel. So they're obviously trying to kind of get some recognition to an international market. But it says 15% on the label, and I stupidly didn't check that when I ordered it. So I'm a little more nervous about that one. And the only other thought I had, which I discounted when I was out there, I was thinking, is perhaps there's something about Slavonian oak that, in the same way that French and American oak have different profiles, that means that what I'm getting, I'm just not used to.
So actually, I'm really glad you brought that point up. I asked at many wineries that we went to, do you use Slavonian oak? And they said, no, we only use French oak. Some used American oak. We don't think that that is a good product. It's their own product. And I said, but in Italy, they buy Slavonian oak and it's really well established and praised. They said, we don't use it.
Wow.
And I said, do you think you ever would think about using it? Slavonian oak, the reason that they use it for Brunello and Barolo and Chianti and places like that is because it is a middle grain. So it's not wide grained like American oak. And it's not super tight grained. And it lasts a very long time. It's extremely hardy. It's strong, so the barrels can last forever. And they're very, very good about allowing the proper amount of oxygen through. And for these long-aged wines, I mean, you're keeping them in these barrels for years and years and years.
Yeah.
You can't have something too wide grained, but sometimes you want something in between. So that's why they use Slavonian oak. It's a tradition, but it also does make the wines better. I must have asked at least 4 or 5 people about this, and they were like, why would we use that? And I'm like, well, there's these places that use it, but they were not really
literally
interested.
Just around the corner from you. So
yeah, they're buying it. They seem to be doing okay. So anyway, again, just a different perspective.
I'm enjoying today was produced using large Slavonian oak barrels. So somebody there is using it.
Which is great because they should be using their own oak barrels. But the answer that I got over and over again was we don't use that. Let's get to the whites. This is where the action is in Croatia. I wanted to get the reds out of the way, but I want to say as good as any other Mediterranean country producing white wine. And I think when you go to Croatia or you go shop for Croatian wines, unless you like that really powerful red style, the action for Croatia is all in the whites. Graševina, not especially exciting, but totally decent, totally drinkable. I had not one undrinkable white, not one that was even like a bad Pinot Grigio. And I had a ton of different kinds of whites, plus all the wineries that we went to, and not one was bad, tasted off, oxidized, none of it. It was all real clean winemaking, and the grapes had interesting flavors, and they were unique and original. Would you say that?
Absolutely. And my 2 white wine drinking travel companions would say the same. Their eyes lit up when I said we're going to have a Grk or a Poşip. They were like, oh, great.
Poşip is amazing.
Poşip was fantastic, yeah. I didn't actually try any Graševina. I think I was in the wrong region for it, so it wasn't really pushed on the wine list so much.
Yeah, they had it in Split. In the cities, they had some of it, yeah.
But our heads were so turned by the Grk and the Poşip that I never got there. Subsequently, when I got back, I realized it's the most widely planted grape variety in the whole of Croatia. Like, I skipped it. I felt like I went to New Zealand and just didn't bother with Sauvignon Blanc. It's like, no, never mind. Yeah.
The reason it's so widely planted is because it's in the Croatian uplands. It's in that internal part. And actually, some of the better wines for Graševina are sparkling because it's got high acidity. So they are making, I have not had it, but I have a contact who lives in Croatia, and she was telling me that there's just some really awesome sparkling wines out of that region. That's really the hotbed for that. That's another thing that they could think about exporting. Sparkling wines are doing pretty well right now.
I had one good traditional method sparkling wine, but it was by the glass. And we were actually at the top of a cable car above Dubrovnik, looking at the old town and the islands with the sunset. So we weren't really, the sparkling wine was a lovely prop to that moment. Yeah, couldn't tell you anything about it, but it was good. So I may have had a Graševina in sparkling form, but
Maybe, but probably in the Dalmatian coast, they might be using other grapes. I don't know. It depends. Again, grow so little. But let's talk about the two real standouts. I will say that Malvasia Istarka is also excellent.
Yeah.
But again, they were sold out of most of it. I was able to get one example of it. And I think this is the story that we need to get to, which is they are going to reserve some for export of all of these. But are we going to be able to get them? Because it's such a small quantity. This is the ongoing theme. I would love to tell you that you could easily get Poşip, and I would love to drink Poşip all the time. I can't find it anywhere.
Well, I'll alert you to a couple of suppliers towards the end. We did have some Malvasia. Apologies if we were there before you and drank it all before you got.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Sorry. Yeah. And they were good. They were lighter, a little bit lighter and fresher than the Grk and the Poşip, but again, always very well received.
Floral, fruity, some nice roundness in the mouth with some good acidity. That's how I would describe it. All of the Malvasias that I had were very, very good. So that passes the test. I would say, even like I said, Grashevina, not the most exciting, but totally sippable and nice. I don't know that I would buy it here, but if I was there drinking it on the coast, zero problem. But the two on the Dalmatian coast that are really hot are the ones I didn't get to try because they make so little Grk and they were completely sold out of it. So can you talk about Grk? It's GRK, by the way, if you're listening to this and you're like, what? How do you spell that?
Yeah, that was the first wine that we had. And to be totally honest, we were just tickled by the name, GRK. Well, we wanted to try pronouncing it. We wanted to hear how the waiting staff pronounced it. And then we drank it and it became our go-to. And we were fortunate because once we left Split, we were on Korčula, which is the main producing region for it. For us, it was the standout. It was really kind of rich, warm, buttery mouthfeel. It had a whole range from citrus through stone fruit, some melon, some honey. I think we had 2 or 3 different producers and never let down, always stunning. So I highly recommend it. You can get it, according to the website, at least from one of the suppliers that I'll talk about later. It was just fabulous. And we did wander around one of the vineyards. A little fun fact about it, it's not self-pollinating. It's one of the few varieties that, so you'd be in the vineyard and there'd be a row of, I think probably Plavets Mali just interwoven to make sure that they got the pollination. But yeah, it's kind of got a bit of a cult following. And there's one particular producer, Bire, Bire, which is the one that I've still got a bottle of. And that you can't get unless you're there. And a sort of an aside about the slight randomness of pricing out there. So that one same bottle we bought twice in wine shops, and we paid 35 euros and 60 euros.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Well, the 60 euros was in the really expensive wine shop in Dubrovnik. And I was like, okay, I want to take one home, so I'm just gonna do it. But we bought one at a restaurant on Korčula, really quite a nice restaurant, and that was only 67 euros. So it's still expensive, but the typical retail versus restaurant markup, not in play at all. You just have to tread carefully.
Well, if you can get it, let's say, because in Split and in all of the other places, Omish, a bunch of different places where we were on our own, and I tried to order Grk probably at least 5 times, and the answer was always the same. We don't have that wine.
So it's on the list, but it's out.
Yeah, well, that was like 90% of the wines. But yeah, they didn't have that, and then you would try to order the Poşip that seemed like, we'll talk about Poşip in a second. There's a little bit more availability there. Grk, it is priced high because there isn't a whole lot. Korčula is a tiny, tiny island in terms of production. And I didn't make it there, but they just don't have a whole lot of wine. Mm-hmm. And Poşip is the one that's spread from Korčula. Poşip is also from Korčula, but it is the one for some reason, and it probably is because Grk is not self-pollinating, so it's a pain to grow. Yeah. The other wine before we get to Poşip, which I think is pretty amazing, is Maraștina. Did you have any of that when you were there?
I don't think so.
It's full-bodied and dry. That is also another wine that they had occasionally at the wineries, sometimes not. That was one where I was always excited to have the Poşip, but Maraștina occasionally was good. Yeah. And then sometimes was not great. I mean, again, no bad wine, but just not so exciting. So Maraștina is interesting. Grashevina probably better as a sipper while you're there, or something that you have in sparkling wine. And then the real standouts, at least for me, I think Malvasia could be really, really good. I could see the potential for that. I bet there's some amazing examples up in Istria. And then it's Grk, which again, very difficult to get because there's barely any of it. And then there's Poşip, which they've got to ride that to the bank.
Yeah.
It is such a fantastic grape. Everywhere that you go, they make it slightly differently in different places, but Poşip is from Dalmatia, from Korčula, and it was sheltered from phylloxera, grows on its own rootstock in sandy soils. It is grown on the Pelješac Peninsula, which is where the Dalmatian Peninsula juts out a little bit. It's on the island of Hvar and Brač, and it is so peachy and tropical and soft. It's like a Viognier in some regard. They make it in a bunch of different styles. It can also be bright and fresh, but it usually has this mouth-coating texture with good acidity. It's just such a well-balanced, pleasant, yet has depth. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I love that grape.
It was great. It was quite similar to Grk, quite full-bodied, perhaps a little bit fresher than the Grk, but really aromatic. I had lots of honey and pears, what I remember. And I have one
pear
back that I've still got to look forward to. And I just had a quick look on the back label to see what it said about it. And it's all in Croatian. So I can tell you nothing of use.
Here's a fun fact. You can take your phone if you download Google Translate and it'll,
I wasn't going to do that just now.
I think this is the big problem for Croatian wines. Also, we didn't talk about this. We'll talk a bit more about Poşip in a second, but the overall issue is that this is not so easy to translate for us. Like you wouldn't see Poşip and be like, yeah, that little thing on the S is an SH sound.
Yep.
Marishtina, the same thing. So once you understand that that's how that rolls, it's fine, but it's hard to ask, like it says Poşip on it. So we would call it Poşip, but we know from being there it's Poşip. That is going to be a challenge for them going forward. If they are going to export, it's got to be.
Only if they want to. If you've got enough, they're importing tourists by the truckload or the cruise load. If everyone's coming to them or enough people are coming to them and they can sell it at restaurant prices in a wine shop, do they need to go to the export market with everything that involves in terms of all of those barriers? I don't know.
I mean, I guess the question that I have is there's a lot of opportunity and they certainly could make money doing it. It could be a good, especially because they've got a grape to ride to the bank. Poşip could be that grape, but it's exactly what you said about them just being happy with what they have. I love this attitude. I love this. I wish we would all do this. Then selfishly, I'm like, come on, guys, I want some of that. I wonder what it is culturally. I will say, what an embracing, friendly, wonderful culture. It is so nice to be there. People are so happy to see you. They are so lovely. They are welcoming. Even with all the tourists that they see, they're still kind and excited that their economy has changed. A lot of them obviously were around in the 90s when all of the bad things happened. And I think they're just so happy to have their country back. I wonder if there will be a change. I don't know, though, because usually what happens is after a country falls out of communism or whatever regime they're in, they go on a tear of industrialization and they go on a tear of exporting and trying to make international connections for multiple reasons. One, because they didn't have it before, but two, also to ensure that you're in the web of trade with countries that would protect you if it turns out that this threat comes again, right? This is a very common story, especially in Eastern Europe. But it seems like if they didn't do it then, will they ever do it? And I think that's a question that, I don't know, we both heard the same story. We were not there together. This is why I really wanted to do this show with you. I did talk to the tour guides who came on Walk and Wine and Brett, who spends a lot of time in Croatia, and they were saying the same thing. So I think this is the common story. But let's go back to Poşip for a second and talk about some of the different versions that people can get and why it is such a great grape. So you had it multiple times also. Did you find any variation in it? Because there were some versions I had that were lighter.
Yeah, there was definitely, I would say even the lighter ones, I'd still say were medium bodied, but some of them were upper level, closer to the Grk. A lot of them if we were just ordering by the glass, that would be, especially where, when we were outside of Korčula and you couldn't get Grk, we would just order a Poşip and enjoy it. And so I had no idea what it was. It just was lovely. But I'd say there was quite a range in terms of
Yes.
the body, for sure. Some oak on some of them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Which I usually don't like oak on particularly Chardonnays, but it worked. And I was like, wow, if you can get the oak right, for me as a non-oak fan in white wines, that was a real plus.
I think it is a bit of a caveat emptor. The grape itself is going to make up for a world of sins if it turns out that the winemaker didn't do a great job, which is why I'm saying I had no bad Poşip when I was there, none.
Yeah.
However, I feel that some people were making it, I'm going to have it with seafood and make it Pinot Grigio style.
Yeah.
Now, the grape, again, can shine through that, which is pretty amazing. Pinot Grigio doesn't have the ability to do that. But then again, they're growing it in such high yields. Who knows what it could do if they cut that back a little bit. Even the lighter styles always had that pear and honey note.
Pear and honey. Yeah.
And that's really interesting in a lighter style wine. You don't always find that. So there were some that were light bodied. Those were a little less exciting to me, but those rich ones, some oaked, some not. They're working with amphora as well. Mm-hmm. So they've got some really interesting versions. And I would say if you're going to buy, after you hear the show, one wine from Croatia, it should be Poşip. Would you agree, or would you say it's Grk?
Well, I would say Grk, just because we're huge fans. I would say you're probably more likely to find Poşip anyway. So, and as you say, that's the one to explore because it's the one that may have more of a future outside of Croatia. So if you're going to get familiar with one, yes, definitely.
And the prices are a little bit better too. Grk only grown on Korčula. Poşip came from Korčula and then spread all over the peninsula. So maybe there's a chance that Grk will eventually do that too. It is obviously in demand, but it remains to be seen. Again, we run up against this problem of nobody's really planting. So I'm not sure what's going on.
Did any of the people you speak to talk about competition for land? And is that a factor as opposed to land ambition? That's not a problem. There seem to be lots of unused land, often quite steep, but I have no idea what it went.
That's great for grapes, though.
Yeah, exactly. You'd think.
I don't think it's that. I think that it's kind of what the wine shop guy said to you, that people are happy where they are.
Yeah.
They don't feel the need to increase production because why would you? You can sell out your entire vintage 2 years in advance, and then all the tourist shops want your wine and they sell it out. And then by October, they've got no whites left. That business model is fine for them. And I think that as a small winery, that's great. I don't know what that means for the future of Croatian wine besides it's a niche product. And I'm not sure that it's going to grow. However, the reason that I'm going to do these trips to Croatia is because it's worth it to go and do a tour of this beautiful historic country and taste the breadth, especially of those white wines. What's interesting is to try the reds and to see whether they evolve. I haven't seen much evolution in the versions that I've had here and the versions I've had there, but who knows? We just don't know what's going to happen. So Bevis, to wrap up, there's a couple in the U.S. There's a few importers. Vinum is one of them. Croatian Premium Imports is another one for the U.S. Blue Danube, I think, is another one. So you really have to actually contact the importers to find out where their wine is sold. What do you have in the UK?
So when I got
US?
back wanting to find out more and drink some more, I did searches on Majestic, which is a big national one here in the UK with shops as well as online. I tried the Wine Society, which usually have a good range, and Laithwaite's, and zero return.
I am surprised by the Wine Society because if I lived in the UK, that would be my go-to.
Nope. Majestic coughed up a Slovenian wine. I literally put in Croatia and they said, well, we could do this. So they were trying, but that's, not close enough. So I found two suppliers that I think are based in Croatia. So you order from them and then they ship it to you. And both say they can do UK and US. Some states in the US not, but I think that's normal. Utah, and I'm sure people there are already struggling with that. But the one that I went to is called 8 Wines. So the number 8 Wines. They list 41 wines from Croatia.
Oh, great.
A lot of them often out of stock. So saying, experience you have.
Same thing we're saying.
It's a bit hit and miss. And they were typically producer names that I recognized from the trip. So Kozlovic, Zlatan, a couple of others.
Rizman. Did you come across Rizman? They're pretty big.
Rizman. I drove past it and we went over that bridge and the view. Stunning.
Gorgeous. I can post a picture in the show notes. We did go to Rizman. The food was fantastic, by the way. The wines were they tasted a little corporate, a little boring.
We had one, there's a neighboring winery called Terra Madre, which I think you can see. If you're looking from Rizman out over the coast, you can see the winery on the next ridge before the coastline. So I ordered from 8 Wines because even though I thought that these were probably just more of the kind of the standard wines, the reason I did is that the other website was really quite expensive. So the other one is called Wine and More, the words Wine and More. They list 364 wines from Croatia. Again, probably a lot of them out of stock.
I mean, 50% out of stock.
Oh, probably, but that's a pretty long list. They do have 2 Grk. They're asking £40-ish for their
$50.
Yeah. So, and who knows if they're as good as the ones that you just. But if you want to try it, that's probably the only way. If you're in the US or UK, you're going to get it come to you. It was so much more expensive. So one example, I can't remember what it was, but one of the wines on 8 Wines was £34. The exact same bottle on Wine and More was £47. So you are paying premium, and their postage just went up. Like each bottle I added, I thought 6 bottles would be the same as 1 or 2. Every time I put another bottle in the basket, it went up by another £5. It was getting up to sort of 40 quid just for the postage. So if you really want to get into the wider range and you can afford it, go to Wine and More. But if you just want to get a sample, go to 8 Wines.
I will put all of these links in the show notes because this is the kind of thing where we really need to give you this information if you're interested in trying these wines, because it's going to be hard for you to find them. I have never been in a store, even in New York City, where I could find a Croatian wine easily. I've maybe seen like 1 or 2 on the shelf. They're always Surlianic Kastelenski, which, as I've said, not something that I'm really kind of interested in spending that money for, because they are going to be $40, or that's not okay for that wine, at least for me. But I would pay more for the whites. Just to summarize, I think we have added our input. I think the important thing for us to deliver in this show is I've given you guys the basis, the fact that there's 3 or 4 separate regions. One's really just sparkling. Istria has some interesting Malvasia Starka. Some reds, Tirana is hit or miss. And then we have the Dalmatian coast, where a lot of these wines are coming from. Over 40% of the production comes out of the Dalmatian coast. But the message here is whites are the thing that you want to do. And you're going to have to seek these out. And sadly, you might just have to go to Croatia and get them yourself. Oh, no. Gorgeous place, amazing sights, and wonderful people. How sad is that? I will say, just from a tourist perspective, because I'm sure people want to know things like this, it was expensive. I thought Croatia was quite expensive.
Yeah. I mean, the places I went to were the tourist zones, and Dubrovnik and Split, but particularly Dubrovnik, really expensive. So you just have to it was similar to Italy, I guess.
Oh, I think it was more expensive than Italy. Yeah, that's what I kept remarking on when I was there, is that it was several euro more.
Wow. Okay.
For almost everything. It was a little bit disappointing because it was so much more expensive than Italy. And
of course, you went to Sicily straight afterwards, so you had a direct.
Yeah, and Sicily is a little less expensive, although it doesn't matter. In general, the prices of Italian food are extremely reasonable. When you go to Italy and you eat out, you're not spending as much as you would in the US for same quality, or especially the UK is so expensive. But I did find that Croatia was way more expensive than Italy. Even parts of France, southern France is cheaper, and certainly Portugal and Spain are way less money than Croatia. I didn't make it to Dubrovnik, which is another reason why I'm really glad that you're here. I was only up in Split and in the wine regions around Split, but it is worth it to go there, I would say, even though it's a little expensive.
If anyone listening can get there, I would, it's go for the history and the coastline, the culture, stay for the wine, and
the whites, let's say. Well, Bevis, thank you so much for being here and assisting me in this. It's important to regularly update some of these shows, especially after I've been to these places, and having you provide the backup and extra perspective is really important for me, because I don't like to criticize regions that are trying to grow, but I do think some of the challenges that we found with supply I think that's the biggest problem for Croatia, really. It's not even wine quality. They've got it. They have it down. They just, especially in the whites, but I don't know what's going to happen, but it'll be interesting. And maybe in a few years, we will meet in Croatia and then we will figure
that'd
out.
be fabulous. Thank you for coming back. It's been an absolute delight.
And with that, this has been another episode of Wine for Normal People. Thank you so much for listening, and we will catch you next time.